Applied Ethical Egoism by Matthew Rales. Acting in self-interest is a natural instinct that has proven time and again through evolution, reproduction, satisfaction, and repetition to be beneficial to the individual being. Ethical egoism as a philosophical theory is normative and in its broadest sense means that looking after yourself first and foremost is the most beneficial way of human nature. Not only is this in human nature, but in nature in general. All species act in ways to further themselves personally, considering the better of evolution to the reproduction that keeps the life form's fundamental genes in perpetuation. Humans follow this pattern similar to animals and clearly exemplify the constant need for satisfaction through entertainment and indulgence. This has been repeated and shown throughout human history, all while humans constantly evolve and become a more perfect species. People as a species have not devolved while being associated with self-interested activities. They have become more enlightened and efficient people. Definitively, ethical egoism has been identified by philosophers with varying levels and principles. A Russian-born American philosopher known as Ayn Rand, 1905 to 1982, is famous for her viewpoint of when one does not act selfishly, they are limiting their potential. Some prime examples are the moral constructs of religion that have limited people before. This was especially exemplified during times of great scientific discoveries that the churches of Europe would shoot down as heresy. Another philosopher to discuss ethical egoism is the Greek Aristotle, who wrote Nicomachean Ethics. He detailed that one must better themselves before acting in the interest of others, because you cannot help another if you are not personally in order. Some philosophers, such as Thomas Hobbes, 1588 to 1679, believed in the descriptive theory of egoism that humans already act selfishly by nature. To be entirely dialectical about these arguments, contrasting principles must also be presented and analyzed. One of the most noted oppositions to ethical egoism and egoism in general was deduced by David Hume, 1711 to 1776, a Scottish philosopher and historian who believed in rationalism, or that by applying egoism, especially in its descriptive form, would deny the existence of love and compassion. In his works, such as An Inquiry Concerning the Principles of Morals, it is supportive to rationalism that by nature species have shown altruism. These ideas may deteriorate the argument for psychological egoism, but they don't explain that altruism is for the betterment of oneself. While we may have natural selfless tendencies, these do not better the life of the person in the end. Acting primarily for yourself will in turn advance your life and eventually society's position as a whole. Altruism must be dismissed entirely for the descriptive egoism or psychological to be endorsed. You need only dismiss the effectiveness of it for the normative. When analyzing prime examples of altruism in philosophical studies, the examples tend to be focused on heroism or saintliness. For example, Mother Teresa may be an example of altruism, but in her selfless acts, did she further herself and benefit society's advancement? Well, with the ideas of Rand, the answer is no. While she may have done morally right, she limited her potential as an expandable mind. The argument could be proposed that her altruism was effective because it showed a high standard of morals. The very fact that her name and actions are so universally known in itself shows the chance of egoism in fame. The point is that if her vast and smart mind had instead been put to its fullest academic or efficient potential, then she could have gone personally further or could have bettered society in ways beyond complete altruism. Aristotle's description of ethical egoism brings in the psychological betterment of a person through selfish action. To even be capable of helping others, one must have themselves in order. Getting yourself in order relies on the effort of yourself. Even if others are helping you, their capability to do so relies on them working on themselves first. Psychologically, it has been shown that relying on others for your own well-being leads to codependence, which is very toxic. Stability in oneself and the interrelationship with our conscience has been shown in psychology to be beneficial when prioritized above all else. Codependency is a pattern of painful dependence on approval from others in an attempt to find safety, self-worth, and identity. Self-worth and identity can only truly be accomplished by working for and on oneself. It is important to see this concept of egoism applied to an understandable example. A prime one of such would be the book and eventually motion picture by F. Scott Fitzgerald titled The Great Gatsby. This story is set in the roaring 20s of New York City. The broadest example of ethical egoism can be concluded at the end of the book. Every character continues to live well off except for the main one, Jay Gatsby, and a secondary one. He was well off at the beginning, living wildly in a life of self-interest. The factor of his demise was the focus on the love of his life, Daisy. Eventually, his full-fledged commitment to her peaks when he is reunited. This focus to please someone beyond himself eventually drives her away and him to his death. All the other characters, such as the narrator Nick Carraway, go on to continue their lives and move forward. In the same story is that of George Wilson. He represents the everyday working man of the era, who devotes his time to others and lives in much poorer conditions. This is an example of someone who is not fulfilling their potential by not always thinking for himself. This idea is reminiscent of Rand's theory on ethical egoism, but also shows signs of Aristotle's. George is so worked up and psychologically affected by not working on himself that he goes beyond reason to kill Gatsby and eventually himself. In George's and Gatsby's cases, putting actions that benefit them first and foremost could have saved their lives. While The Great Gatsby may have been written to focus on love, money, and corruption, egoism prevails for the remaining characters. In closing, it can be proven through reason and induction that acting for oneself is not only natural and evolutionary, but that through entertainment, self-esteem, and the flaws in opposing argument is the most effective way to live life. Several philosophers have came up with their ideas of practical egoism, and these ideas could be applied to every life when carefully analyzed. Heroism and altruism may exist, but have been proven less productive than egoism. With a lack of self-interest, psychological problems may also arise. Examples of movies and books, such as those previously stated, also show the pertinence of these ideas. While being selfish may be considered a moral sin, when properly picked apart, it is a lifetime advantage.